Today, we got two of the most powerful beings in Middle-earth going head-to-head. Sauron versus Smaug. Who's coming out on top here? Well, let's find out. Sauron, the Lord of the Rings, was a fallen Maya, creator of the One Ring, and the greatest lieutenant of Melkor, the first Dark Lord. After Melkor's defeat by the Valar, Sauron became the second Dark Lord and strove to conquer the world by creating the Rings of Power. He was eventually defeated in the War of the Last Alliance, and Isildur even managed to cut off the One Ring from Sauron's finger, leaving Sauron without his power and lying dormant for centuries. After regaining his strength, Sauron returned to power, only to be permanently defeated in the War of the Ring by the destruction of the One Ring at the hands of Frodo Baggins. In the Silmarillion, Sauron is described as a shapeshifter, taking on the forms of a vampire, a serpent, or a great wolf, even as the angelic Lord of Gifts. But he eventually got to the point where he could no longer take on any fair form, instead being the image of hatred and malice made visible. He also gave off immense heat, so people would burn to death by his very touch. It's been suggested that his entire body was blackened by fire and heat. Sauron's chief power was deception and disguise. He was so good at it, actually able to deceive the elves into creating the Rings of Power. This level of deception required to fool the elves must have gone beyond simply taking on a fair form, as Sauron was literally instructing the elves to make artifacts that, while capable of great good, were ultimately for his own domination and were imbued with the power to change the natural order of the world. The elves were unaware of who they were dealing with until the 11th hour, and only narrowly escaped his trap. Centuries later, Sauron is able to deceive men and steer them directly to their own destruction under promises of eternal life. Such destruction is definitely a testament to Sauron's manipulative nature, to twist the perceptions of his enemies. However, the extent, nature, and specifics of Sauron's power are largely left to the imagination. Although we do know that, like his master Morgoth, he was capable of altering the physical substance of the world around him by mere effort of will. So, as we got one corner, the Lord of the Ring, Sauron. But, entering the corner, another ring, Master of the Lonely Mountain, the dragon Smaug. Smaug was a flying fire drake of the Third Age. Drawn towards the enormous wealth by the dwarfs of the Lonely Mountain, he laid waste to the neighboring city of Dale and conquered the Lonely Mountain, driving the surviving dwarves into exile. For the remaining years of his life, Smaug cached the treasure to himself, staying within the mountain, until a company of dwarves managed to enter the Lonely Mountain and awaken him from his slumber. Smaug is said to be stronger than most dragons. He's able to shake the mountain roots. Just him flying makes a noise like a hurricane and cracks pine trees and knocks them over. He's dented iron gates, knocked over massive pillars. He's able to smash rocks with his tail, and she knocked over part of the Lonely Mountain. Just the force of his laugh enough to knock Bilbo Baggins over. Smaug is also incredibly durable. He's claimed that his armor is like 10 shields, that no blade can pierce through his hide. Arrows actually just ricochet off him. He's withstood being submerged in molten gold, and his body is actually covered in treasure, essentially giving him his own pseudo-body armor. However, Smaug does have one weak spot in his underbelly that isn't covered by treasure. When an arrow hit that spot, he was pretty much instantly killed. Smaug's fire breath is also insanely powerful, being able to set forests on fire and blast the mountainside with his flames. He's able to fire a more focused napalm blast, destroying buildings, obliterating watchtowers, and even blew through the main gates of Erebor. Smaug is so powerful, in fact, he's able to kill large armies of dwarves all by himself, and his senses are so heightened that he can still smell and hear Bilbo even when he's got the One Ring on and is invisible. So, who wins? Well, let's break it down. Today we got two of the most powerful beings in Middle-earth, as well as the chief antagonist in Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, going head-to-head. Sauron, the Lord of the Rings, is taking on the fire drake Smaug. So, who's come out top here? Well, let's break it down. Also, just to clarify here, we'll be seeing composite versions of both villains, meaning we're including both the Hobbit book and the Hobbit movies, Lord of the Rings books, Lord of the Rings movies. Right, now let's get started. And starting out with Smaug, man, the guy is a force to be reckoned with. Now with Smaug in the book, while his actual size is unknown, it's never explicitly stated. Even the illustrations by Tolkien are kinda all over the place. The most we really get from the books is when Tolkien said that the secret tunnel with a 5-foot tall door and passage wide enough for 3 people to walk through together was too small for the dragon even when he was young. And when Smaug was fully grown, well, he could only put the tip of his nostril into the passageway. Then in the Atlas of Middle-earth, Smaug is said to be 60 feet long, but it's not really clear if this is actually considered canon or not. However, we're using a positive version of the dragon, and in the movies, VFX supervisor Joe Lettieri, Smaug was clocking in at roughly twice the size of a 747. They designed him to have his physical size dominate. Smaug's also incredibly strong. This is backed up by his feats in both the books and movies. He built to smash over massive pillars, dent his way through iron gates, not to bust up part of the Lonely Mountain, just the forces of him flying, not to make a noise like a hurricane and make pine trees creak and crack. Also incredibly durable, as arrows ricochet off of him, and Smaug boasts that no blade can pierce him. Although, yes, Smaug has pretty significant weak spots, as there's one little piece of his underbelly that's not covered by treasure. When an arrow struck him in that one particular spot, he died. Then, of course, he's a dragon, so Smaug's got some pretty powerful fire as well, being able to destroy buildings, blow through the main gates of Erebor, reignite the dwarf's massive forge, and carpet bomb Lake Town. Smaug also isn't like the dragons in Game of Thrones or something like that. So he can talk, he's actually highly intelligent. He'll plot, brood, he's got centuries of experience, and is easily as smart as most humans, if not smarter. But at the end of the day, for as powerful as Smaug is, he is just a dragon. Sauron, well, he's something else altogether. He's a Maia, one of the most powerful Maiar to have ever lived, in the same order as the Valar, also stated directly by Tolkien to be in a far higher order than either Gandalf or Saruman. He's able to manipulate the fires in Mount Doom. He squared giant clouds to blot out the sun. The Fellowship even came to realization that Sauron was the source of the storms that forced them to go through Moria rather than through Mountain Pass as they had originally planned. In a weakened state, Sauron is able to defeat Gandalf and match Lady Galadriel. He's a powerful sorcerer, he's even durable enough to take attacks from the Valar that were meant to kill him. However, here's the thing about Lord of the Rings and Middle-earth. Power isn't necessarily who could beat who in a fight. Power doesn't quite work like that in Tolkien's universe. It almost never comes down to who is on whose level, and power is rarely presented as simply some measured battle prowess. There are all sorts of subtler, more influential forms of power, and Tolkien was a big fan of luck and happenstance shaping large events. That's who Sauron is. That's how he's powerful. I mean, one thing to keep in mind is that Sauron loses every physical fight we see him take part in. Sauron is one of the most inherently powerful Maiar we see individually. But like we said, power in this context does not necessarily equate to combat effectiveness. Sauron is Morgoth's second in command, but his status was a strategist. The Balrogs were the fighters. Dragons were their ultimate weapon. A host of them actually managed to force the Valar themselves to retreat during the War of Wrath. However, back to Sauron. His chief strategy was often choosing manipulation over direct combat. If direct combat was inevitable, he would often just throw an army at his enemies. Even in War of the Last Alliance, Sauron only comes to the field following a long, drawn-out war and siege. Sure, he killed plenty of men and elves, and the only combatants who would face him, in his full-on, ring-lord, cow-before mortals mind-crushed glory, were Elendil and Gil-galad. But he still didn't make it out of the fight alive. During the First Age, Sauron was basically beaten by a giant dog. Granted, it was a ringless Sauron, but still, a giant dog. Basically, think of Sauron as Batman. There are beings out there who are a lot more physically powerful than him and can beat him in a physical fight. But give him time to repair and plan, and he can beat just about anyone. So in a purely physical fight, I think Smaug would definitely win. One-on-one straight-up fights rarely ever go well for non-dragons, and they're often only taken down by either blind luck or inside knowledge about the dragon's weak spots, which tend to be their underbelly. But of course, it's important to note that while Smaug might destroy Sauron's physical body in a one-on-one fight, he could not kill Sauron himself. Sauron is essentially a spirit being, something Smaug can't defeat with just physical attacks. And Sauron is also effectively immortal, so he'll constantly just keep on coming back. Smaug can't even destroy the One Ring in order to break the loop, seeing as how Gandalf said that not even the mightiest dragon, Ankhlagon the Black, could have melted the One Ring, and no remaining dragon is capable of reaching that level of heat. So presumably, the Dark Lord would probably just make another body, then fall back on his more usual tactics of raising a horde of orcs, his go-to strategy, or somehow using deception, his favorite strategy, to defeat the dragon of the Lonely Mountain. He may simply be able to bend Smaug to his will, seeing as how he essentially inherited Morgoth's role in Middle-earth and kept his orc armies in check simply by the force of will. So, end of the day, who wins here? Well, if they were ever to have a one-on-one cage match, gotta give that one to Smaug. He's a dragon, some of the mightiest beings in Middle-earth, and are capable of taking on gods. And Sauron just isn't built for one-on-one fights of that nature. I mean, like I said before, he prefers manipulation over direct conflict. And in fact, when he was confronted by an army of men, Sauron actually chose to surrender rather than battling against them. However, thing is, that surrender is actually just part of Sauron's plan. Sauron always has a plan. I'm sure of a plan to defeat Smaug too. He might lose the battle, but he'll win the war, as it were. And so, in true Tolkien fashion, where power isn't just who would win in a battle, gotta give this one to Sauron. He might lose a physical body or two along the way, but I believe if he really wanted to take Smaug down and take the Lonely Mountain for himself, he'd find a way to do so, whether it's through deception, manipulation, or just run together an orc army. Sauron is coming out on top here. Sauron wins. But what do y'all think? I would love to hear your thoughts. Sign off in the comments down below. Also, be sure to like button, subscribe button, turn on notifications from the DanCo army, and I will see you next time.